everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another Falconry video. Today's video, we're going to be talking about a really important topic that was actually suggested by one of you. One of our viewers here had suggested, hey, there really ought to be a video on what to do if you've got a bird that's extremely vocal. It's screaming all the time, wailing, it's just... What do you do about that? What's that all about? And that is such a good idea, so thank you for the suggestion. Before we jump into this topic, though, if you haven't already, please do hit subscribe. It does help me to build this channel up, really trying to keep it up and running, and that really does help to do that, to accomplish that. But jumping on in here, screaming. A bird of prey, falcon, hawk, owl, eagle, you name it. A bird of prey, a raptor, that is screaming. Do you want to know who loves a screaming raptor? Hollywood. Movies and TVs absolutely love that. Most of you are familiar. The red-tailed hawk, a very common species we have here locally in the United States. It makes a very stoic, very recognizable scream that we've all heard in movies. Yeah, we've all heard that a million times. But we usually don't see it for red-tailed hawks. It seems that anytime you're going to see something, oh, there's a bald eagle on the screen. There's a falcon on the screen. Seems to not matter. Just even if you're going to see a big, broad, beautiful vista, you have your heroes, your warriors that are on their trek, and they come and they all come out and see this beautiful view. And what do you have? Of course, always. The truth of the matter is, hawks don't do that. Hawks don't just sit around screaming nonstop. Now, you also notice, not only in the examples I've given, but also if you have a falconer. This is usually with medieval movies of some kind. If you have a falconer represented, they're walking around with their bird. Oftentimes, it's a bird not native to the land, but let's say it is. They're walking around with their falcon. A well-trained falcon is kind of just like chilling. I'm good. I don't need to, I might look around. I'm on a perch. I'm on your fist, whatever. They're not flapping all the time. They're not screaming all the time. And when a Hollywood company says, hey, we've gone to the effort, we've found a falconer, we've hired them, they're contracted, and we're having an actor walk in holding whatever the bird may be, they're holding it, and you got to think, during medieval and Renaissance times, people walking around in a public area with birds of prey was much more common than is depicted in movies. So they've got their one token falconer with a bird. And what do they always do? The filmmakers like, the bird's not doing anything. It's just sitting there. Can you pet it or something? So what do you see? You always see your actor portraying a falconer constantly petting their bird. Yes, I just walk around just non-stop petting my falcon. And they usually, every time they're on screen, if it's important to the story, they'll have screaming. And they'll have meep, 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 meep. You look at the bird's mouth, it's not moving. Okay? That's Hollywood. Whether it's showing an eagle with the sound of a red-tailed hawk being played, whether it's heroes coming across a vast landscape and it warrants woo, or even I was with my nephews the other day and watching, and they had a little kids show, and there was like this, every time this character was learning how to fly in a little airplane, this little cartoon character, every time they showed him on screen, you had a red-tail sound, and I'm like, there's something about that sound that we like. Not in real life, though. In real life, we don't want our birds screaming. It's a very bad thing, and it doesn't happen. Birds of prey most of them don't just go around vocalizing nonstop because, number one, it scares away your prey. It alerts your prey to where you are. That's not good. The other thing is, you might be prey for a bigger raptor, and so you also alerts potential predators of your position. Screaming is not normal, and it's not good in the wild. So why does it happen? Usually, it has to do with food or with territory. And this, I'm going to give you some problems and some solutions in this, but what I want you to come back to, no matter what, if you're thinking, why is my bird screaming? Why is it being overly vocal? Come back to food, territory, and association. I'll get to that in a minute, but just as you're troubleshooting your own solutions, remember, it's usually dealing with food. But let's take a look at the psychology of these birds. Let's take an example like a Cooper's hawk. Cooper's hawks, you're in a nest, you hatch, you're a baby, you're this baby Cooper's hawk, you're growing up, mom and dad are bringing you food. And as you get older, it's in your best interest to be selfish, to not share, to be like, oh, I want to, when mom and dad come to the nest with food, I got to rush to the edge and try to take the food and put my wings out to keep my siblings from coming up over and getting some of that food. It is in your best interest to be selfish in a world of survival of the fittest. Now, it's in the parents' interest for all of their young to survive, because each one of those offspring carries their DNA. But you as an individual, as a baby growing up, it does not serve you to be magnanimous and to share. And so as they're getting a little older, they start to vocalize. They start to wail and do these hunger cries. The more hungry they are, the louder they are. And you remember from my other videos, birds of prey grow while they're in the nest at breakneck speed. They're just, and so it's very bad to have a big gap without having food. Even a gap of several hours can leave fret marks on growing feathers, can lead to imbalances of calcium deposition in growing bones. So first of all, making wails, making hunger calls alerts the parents wherever they're out hunting, like, hey, it's getting urgent, I really need some food. So that's kind of an important principle. That's an inference. It might be wrong, but there is cause and effect. We do see that. And even just making those calls in captivity can draw, if you have a captive breeding program and you make those calls even artificially, the parents like appear because they're like, oh, it elicits that response. Just like if your child's crying, you rush, oh, what's wrong? Pick them up. Probably something similar to that, though not exactly the same. When those birds are getting older, they get to that brancher age where they're learning to hop and run around the nest, and they want to be the first to when mom and dad appear. They will jump up on the branches, and even though they still sleep in the nest, they're jumping up on the branches, screaming. And so you're trying to be the first to get food, but if a baby has a full crop, that vocalization goes down, maybe even stops, and the other babies are still vocalizing, hey, I'm the one who didn't get food or didn't get enough food. So it can also attempt to help the parents say, hey, wait, who still needs to eat? That one hogged the food last time. This one's screaming louder. Okay, I'm going to give it to you. But, of course, the parents leave. They do. I've talked in my videos how most raptor species will injure prey and fly near the nest, and and the babies come out after. They drop the food and whoa, they go after it, simulating hunting, kind of training them. Hey, look, you have to pursue prey because I'm ditching out in a few days or a week. When the parents leave, the babies do make those calls still. But eventually they learn, hey, mom and dad aren't coming back. Oh, it doesn't do me any good. And they stop. At that age, when they're still in the vicinity of the nest, though they don't sleep in the nest, when you make that call, that is a good way to draw them in. We've talked about that in other videos. John Griggs and I, even on the podcast, have mentioned when the babies have just left the nest and the parents are gone, if you replicate the baby call, in their case it's a then babies come back because they think, oh, I hear another hawk of my species making the mom and dad are coming, give me food call. Maybe mom and dad did end up coming back. I better rush over so that I can get in on that action too, get some food. And so, but eventually it cuts off. But programming is still there. And we'll get to that in a minute. That's the normal progression. Mom and dad leave, the babies learn to shut up, and if you are trapping a migrating bird that is what we call a passage, it has left the parents, it's not an adult, but it's full-sized, and it has learned to be quiet. If you, however, are raising a baby from babyhood, from a little fluff ball yourself, whether it's from the wild or whether it's a captive bred bird, and you are just bringing it food, it's going to start to vocalize. And you never leave. In the wild, the parents leave. You haven't left. And so that is the most common form of annoyingly vocalizing birds that we see, are imprints that have been imprinted based off of food instead of socialization. And they're like, hey, this guy or gal is always around, and so I better vocalize. It's mom and dad. I should meh, meh, meh. And remember, babies are fat. We try to keep them fat because they're growing. once you're ready to hunt your bird, you slim them down, you work them out, you get rid of the fat, drop the weight, so they're a lean, mean killing machine, and so they're feeling a little bit of urgency and hunger, and then it will drive you mad, as well as your neighbors if you have them, which is not good. So food imprints, where your bird is raised by you, thinks it's a human or that you're a bird and that you are its parent, is the worst way. That is the worst kind and one of the hardest ways to break that cycle. There are other ways it can happen as well. But again, they usually go back to food. They usually relate back to food or territory. So food is the first one. You might have a non-imprint bird, but if you have made food too important and associated it, more importantly, with you, like, I'm here, I brought you food. I'm here, fly to my glove. I'm here, here's some food because we're not flying today. You appear, you've brought food, and then you leave. That is the same role the parents were doing. So a non-imprint bird can start to, oh, hey, yeah, something is bringing me food for free. Oh, I didn't have to hunt it. Yeah, okay, and they can start to become vocal and aggressive. Not good. Can happen with territory as well. This happens to a lot of falconers, especially a lot of new falconers. They'll get a red-tailed hawk maybe, they fly it for their first fall and winter, then it's springtime. Spring and summer is when we usually molt our birds. We fatten them up, we let them grow new feathers, they're free lofted, which means they're just free to fly around in their chamber, and then come the next fall, you cut their weight again and start hunting them again, right? Well, sometimes you get into this cycle, and many an apprentice has ended up having their red-tailed hawk become incredibly vocal and violent because they're just walking in, putting food, walking in, putting food. Doing that, you have established that flight chamber, that mew, as territory. And it is territory where food is brought to, therefore it should be defended. So in their mind, it seems as though you are kind of, once again, taking that parental role and you're coming into their territory. So their psychology gets very messed up by doing that, oftentimes, especially with the first-year red-tail, where they are like, wait, you're my parent, and you're bringing me food, but you're also an intruder coming into my territory. We'll talk about that one in a second on ways to fix that, but that's an example of a non-imprint that can become vocal and aggressive. So, but again, it's largely based off of territory. Some birds, especially if they had left their parents, but they're still quite young, maybe a hawk trapped in early September, just weight management can be enough. And when you're starting to slim them down and they're experiencing a little bit of hunger, a little bit of urgency for the first time as they're slimming and becoming an active predator, that can be like, oh. And again, if you've made food too important, that can transfer to being a time to, I better vocalize until I get taken hunting. Another very strange one is just the influence of other birds. And I had this happen, and it was the strangest thing for me, and it was an eye-opener. I had a bunch of birds, both falconry birds and education birds at the time. And they were all quiet, they were all well-trained, they were all well-behaved birds. And I inherited this goshawk. And this goshawk, I didn't train it, it was an imprint, and it had been... the imprinting had been done based more off of food than off of socializing, and so this was a bird that was vocal. And it started to meow, 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 meow. Didn't think too much of it, Summertime, the bird's fat, but it's still vocalizing. I'm like, that's kind of strange, but it's okay, Then, next thing I know, one of my golden eagles starts doing a call back. And it is a golden eagle hunger call, an old golden eagle baby call, not a goshawk call. They're different calls. But still, just hearing that baby urgency triggered in the golden eagle, oh, hey, I need to, food. Okay, wait, food. Yeah, but there's going to be mom and dad. If they're vocalizing, I need to be saying, no, over here, bring me food. Next thing you know, I had two peregrines, and they both started, they started doing, next thing you know, almost all of my birds over the course of a few weeks started vocalizing. And I'm like, nope. I ended up having to take him inside and put him in a room where they wouldn't hear him to try to break the habit and work through some problems because it was summertime. And most of the fixes usually a lot of times involve hunting season in the fall and winter. So, but it's just interesting that all those other birds were not imprints. They were all silent, well-behaved, and just another bird screaming triggered in their mind, oh, a baby's calling. Well, I better call too, or else they're going to bring food to that baby and not me, even though these were adult birds. So that is one that we can also understand can be a problem. So let's take a look at some of the solutions, some of the ways we can kind of address this and have it help. But again, the first thing is to try to identify what is causing it. Are they imprint? Is it food related? Is it territory related? Is it another bird that they're housed near that's squawking that's setting them off? Try to identify that first and troubleshoot through it. But whether or not you know exactly the cause, here's some things that you can try to do. First and foremost, and most importantly, is to fly and hunt your bird. Get it out there. Get it on the wing. Someplace that is not a mew, is not your house, and is not you. Okay? Because all those things can be parental in their thinking. They might think you are their parent. They might think their mew or your house or your truck are their territory or their nest. One of those things might be triggering that. And if you are spending hours away from all those things, yeah, they see you, but they're hunting. So they're not just sitting around perching, I'm fluffed up, beep, beep. Instead, they're actually actively, engaged. Their mind is elsewhere. That can set a trend away from that vocalization. Just getting them out, getting them flying. Especially some of these birds, like if you're flying a falcon, if you have an imprint falcon that's just screaming all the time, it's not going to be screaming when it's circling up, doing this athletic performance of, I'm going to go a mile upwind of you, and I'm going to circle up over the next 15, 20 minutes till I'm thousands of feet overhead. They're pumping their wings so fast and they're breathing. They're not screaming while they're flying. That takes away from their ability to metabolize and perform. And so, again, flying is a great way to handle that. Hunting is a great way to handle that. One of the things about hunting, why it is so important, is it directs aggression. So if their vocalization is like, I'm waiting for mom, well, a trained, seasoned, experienced bird, whether it's wild or with a falconer, is not screaming at the prey. It's sneaking up, diving, hunting, chasing, whatever, grabbing the prey, and that's that. Okay? So if you are saying, hey, you get food when you chase and attack prey, that helps the proper grown-up mindset take over. Instead of screaming until food shows up, you should pursue food and then get rewarded. Okay? So it's a good way to do it. Good way to direct the natural order of how things are supposed to be. Now, this is not a video about hacking or tame hacking. Hacking is an intermediate thing where you can, through various means, have your bird spend some time semi-wild, flying, doing its thing. I've done it a lot with goshawks in the past, I've done it with peregrines as well. But this isn't a video about that. But that is a principle that either I can make another video or you can look into online, the concept of hacking or tame hacking a bird. But it's the same principle. It's just getting them away from you, away from your mew, getting them out and hunting and flying and thinking like an adult would think. So that's the same principle. Get them out, fly them, hunt them. Another thing you can do is do anything you can to reduce or eliminate your food association. So if you are feeding your bird off the fist all the time, even if they're not being aggressive towards you, because look at my other videos on the Falconry playlist to talk about food association and how that works. Even if they're not being aggressive, if you showing up is being equated with food, that may be what's the case. So maybe instead, you switch up your routine. You stop feeding them off the fist. You get them out of the mew, walk them someplace else, hold them for a while, go sit and watch TV holding him, go for a walk, and then bring them to food. Maybe if it's in the summer, you have a plate out in a yard and have them go and attack that. So they're leaving you and attacking food, which is the same principle as leaving your fist to attack prey. So that principle is pretty sound. It's pretty straightforward. Just disassociate yourself with food. Sometimes people will do strange things like, I know people who, during the molt, will just basically make a ghost costume. They take a sheet and put a couple of holes or sunglasses on, and they'll just feed their birds that way in the mew. And it's abstract. I don't do it that way, but it works. The principle works, as they're not seeing you, so they're not associating you directly with food. Maybe if they see ghosts, they'll scream at them, but then they're not screaming at you for food, as if you were a parent. So any way you can find ways to disassociate yourself directly with food, or at least reduce that association so you're not a parental figure in their mind, is a great way to handle that. Another thing that can happen is sometimes you have to remember you cannot ever punish a bird of prey. No matter what they do, doesn't matter if they're grabbing your face, you cannot punish them. You can only do positive reinforcement. Reward them for behavior that, if you're having a meshing of minds, they're understanding what you want and they do it, you reward them. But you don't punish them. You reinforce the behavior you are trying to achieve, ignore the behavior that you're not, and find ways to avoid behavior that you don't want. So when I say this is not a form of punishment. But sometimes, especially in the summer, if a bird gets in a mindset of meh, 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 and won't shut up, sometimes just doing a mister, spraying with a hose, and being not, but just like a fine mist, like, oh, wait, what's that? They have to kind of react to, is it raining? What? Maybe give them a little drinks and just, getting a little wet on their head. That can sometimes be enough to help them reset their brain, their thinking, if they're caught in sort of a feedback loop of what they are doing. You have to take a look at that, though, because there's still something that was causing them to want to vocalize. So what are you going to do about that? Even if you reset them in that moment, you still need to address. That's not a fix. That is a momentary help. But it doesn't fix the problem. You have to try to troubleshoot what is the problem. What can I alter in the upkeep of and life of this bird to make it not be a screamer? Now, if there is too much association with you with food, they see your face, they recognize you, even if they're not an imprint, that can happen with some birds, and they're viewing you too much like a parent. Sometimes what can help is to say, hey, look, I'm temporarily going to have this bird be under the care of another falconer, and fill out whatever transfer paperwork you need to do to make it legal in your area, and say, hey, you want to fly this bird for a season, or hey, can you watch this bird for 2 or 3 weeks and care for them? And they're like, oh, this is a different person. Sometimes that can be enough to help reset and shift to where the bird's like, oh, wait, you're not handing me food directly, you're taking me to food, so you're not my parent, and I don't recognize your face. And then when the bird comes back to you, then you continue on whatever feeding regimen the other falconer was doing that helped break up that screaming cycle, like taking them to food instead of bringing food to them. So that's a good one. A simple version of that also is to change your mew. If you have them in one mew and they're screaming and they have become territorial and they think, this is my space, I must defend it, I must vocalize and scream about it, it's also my nest, and that falconer is my parent. Sometimes just putting them in a different mew. If you have more than one mew, swap mews, and that mew or that flight pen or that weathering area that they have not been in, they're like, oh, wait, what's this? But again, still, that's not a complete fix. You still have to figure out what was it that you were doing that in the other mew is making them be vocal, and figure it out. And whatever that thing is, don't do it in the new mew that you have put them in. One of the last things is really just kind of patience. Again, if you're doing everything right and they still have picked up that bad habit, if you are getting out and hunting and flying and you've tried to disassociate with food and they're still vocalizing and it's some first-year bird, most birds will outgrow that. Instead of doing it weeks after their parents left, maybe it takes them months, and it might be the next year that they really kind of grow up and their brain, oh, I don't sit around and scream all day. That's not very positive to think about from that perspective, but that is kind of the end. Hail Mary passes, like, well, if you're patient and you're doing everything right, then eventually it should correct itself. So those were a few principles to talk about it. I could do one more in depth, but this video is long enough as it is. But again, troubleshoot. Go back and say, what is it that is causing this? Knowing that food and territory and imprinting somehow, even if it's not an imprint, if they're going back to that imprint-like mindset of like, wait, you're bringing me food, or does that mean you're my parent? I should scream at you. Go back to those principles, and through the lens of those, troubleshoot and say, what is doing this? What can I change? Remember the principle, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So whatever version of falconry you are practicing with this bird, if you keep doing it the same way, it's going to keep screaming. So you have to troubleshoot, look at what you are doing, look at what you can alter as it relates to food, food association, and territory, and find a solution, even if it's not a solution that I brought up here. That's the way to troubleshoot it and figure it out. So let me know if you have any other questions. I didn't really go into depth on like certain things like Harris hawks love to vocalize more for social reasons, and I didn't address that. I didn't address owls, but I just wanted to give the basics. So I hope that it provides a useful way for you to kind of address your bird if it has this problem. Again, let me know if you have questions, comments. Let all of us know what techniques have worked for you. If you have something really well that has helped to get birds to stop vocalizing or screaming. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe to the channel. And as always, happy hawking.